Professional Fraternity Association Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative. Whether you've arrived via email invitation or by visiting the PFA website, I'm glad you're here. My name is Dondi Scumaci. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the launch of our DEI initiative and guide you through the first element of our program. PFA encourages and supports professional fraternity and sorority organizations to set and preserve high standards on campus and in professional practice. These standards include fostering an environment that cultivates and supports diversity awareness, equity, and inclusion for all. The first step in making this happen is a multi-phase program inviting members to start with themselves. In phase one of the DEI initiative, we explore implicit or unconscious bias using the Harvard Implicit Bias Assessments. This allows us to discover and understand biases within ourselves so we can better understand how our attitudes affect our behavior, and we can make a more positive impact on our campuses, in our communities, professions, and the world. We have all felt the impact of race relations this past year. We know the protests after the death of George Floyd were not the result of a single act. People are having conversations about equity and fairness in ways that seemed impossible just a short time ago. Equity is not only a social and organizational issue, it's also a personal one. We all have the potential to consider how we impact the bigger picture, how we engage with others in terms of fairness of perception and of behavior. This is a time of looking deeper at bias. I'm going to show you how you can participate personally by exploring your own biases. I've done this work myself, and I'm confident you will find it fascinating and compelling. The ultimate goal is for each of us to be part of and foster a culture where everyone has the opportunity to contribute and thrive. We want to create momentum around this effort, and we want you to be part of that. There are 3 steps to the process. This video is step 1. In the next few moments, I will give you the information you need to move forward and draw the most value from the experience. We'll explore what implicit or unconscious bias is and why it matters so much. Step 2 is completing 2 assessments from the implicit bias assessments developed at Harvard. The assessments explore bias in race, gender, career, and age. 2 assessments will be randomly assigned from these topics. It will take about 30 minutes total to complete both. I'll leave you with the information you need to access your assessments at the conclusion of the video. Step 3 is listening to a podcast. Once you have completed the assessments, you will follow the link to listen to the podcast. The podcast will help you turn your insights into personal and actionable strategies. That's exciting because research indicates biases are impressionable. It's possible then to recognize them, reduce the influence they have, and perhaps even unlearn them. Let's talk for a moment about the goal of the assessments. You are going to take a huge step forward towards understanding your bias. You will be randomly assigned 2 assessments. Once completed, immediate insights will be delivered back to you. Unlike other assessments you will take in life, these are not designed to deliver a pass, fail, or even a grade. Take heart, you will not fail, but you may be surprised by what you learn. The objective is to reveal where bias is impacting your perception, reception, responses, results, and relationships. The aim isn't to cure you of bias, rather empower you to develop strategies to counter the impacts and limitations of bias. This is about self-awareness, leading you to a place of higher effectiveness with a broader, more diverse audience. Using a computer and a keypad, you'll look at and react to pictures and words, working quickly and honestly. The research is decades old and originated at Harvard University. It will provide results on your bias to you immediately. Please be sure no one other than you will view your personal responses. However, we will be looking at the aggregate data. After you receive your results, you may notice things in the environment you didn't notice before. You may recognize a split second judgment that would have been previously undetectable. That's the beauty of this work. It goes and grows with you. Let's start with an understanding of what bias is and how it impacts all of us. Think of it this way. You are wearing a special pair of glasses. They are custom made, uniquely yours. You see the world through them. Sometimes the lenses are not entirely clear. They keep you from relating, respecting, connecting, learning, and risking. Your lenses inject bias into your circumstances. They limit your vision and they shift your focus. They create filters that alter facts and realities. They leave impressions that can impact how you engage. Bias is doing its work in this way. We all have bias. It's the human condition. It's been said if you have a brain and you're breathing, you have bias, full stop. In fact, bias is normal. It lives deep in the subconscious. These are patterns and associations developed over the course of life. It's a human survival mechanism which intends to serve you. We are safer in an in group, and we see danger or discomfort in an out group. The problem is bias is pervasive and involuntary, and we can treat other people unfairly because of it. Bias might include gender, age, ethnicity, sexuality, politics, title, or position. Just a few examples. The research on bias has exploded over the last decade with more than 1,000 studies. I hope you'll dig into the research. It's fascinating. You'll find articles and links to support your exploration of implicit bias at the PFA website. So, what is bias and where does it come from? That's a bit like asking a fish to describe water. It's all around us, in our environment, our culture, society, in the media we consume on a daily basis. The messages we receive, what we're taught, how we are socialized, and the experiences we have. Through all of this, unconscious associations and patterns are formed. Have you heard of unconscious thought theory? That really is a thing. There is a tremendous amount of activity in the unconscious brain. There's a whole lot going on in there, more than you might even imagine. Unconscious bias is the quintessential you really don't know what you don't know. You're oblivious to it until something happens to disrupt the pattern or the code in your brain. The Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity explains implicit bias this way. The implicit associations we harbor in our subconscious cause us to have feelings and attitudes about other people based on characteristics such as race, ethnicity, age, and appearance. These associations develop over the course of a lifetime, beginning at a very early age through exposure to direct and indirect messages. In addition to early life experiences, the media and news programming are often cited origins of implicit associations. Simply put, biases are the positive or negative preferences for things, people, and groups. Unconscious bias refers to bias we are unaware of. And biases go beyond simple perceptions. They press through those perceptions and assumptions to form unconscious decisions. They can even cause us to observe like behaviors and form very different opinions based on who is behaving that way. Consider literature, film, and television. What do the heroes look like in these stories? When a white hero behaves badly, is it portrayed as sexy and provocative? Is his bad behavior presented in an appealing way? Now check the villains. Who often portrays the dangerous, menacing character in the story? What color is the villain? If a black or brown person is menacing, dangerous, are they thought about in the same way? What about gender and career as another example? When men are direct and decisive, they are called leaders. How are women described when they display the same boldness? Yeah, I think we know the answer to that. Let's stay with that example for a moment. Women in the workplace often soften their messages to avoid being seen as aggressive. I call it the verbal wince. It sounds like, I could be wrong, but this is just my opinion, but there it is. We don't just have bias, we experience it too. We develop coping mechanisms to deal with the bias we encounter. Maybe we find ourselves over explaining, justifying, defending, holding back, withdrawing, or avoiding. Perhaps with greater awareness, we could develop more empowered responses like boundary setting, negotiating for a change in behavior, and assertive communication. I do a fair amount of executive coaching in my consulting practice. I cannot tell you how many times I find myself in front of articulate, gifted women who sit at the leadership table struggling to find their voice, to take strong stands, to earn their place at the table. So she finally gets to sit in the chair, but is pushed away from the table and can't reach the plate. Add another factor like race, and the experience is even more pronounced. I think this is an important note to make. The bias we bring into our scenarios ask another person to adapt. That's unfair. This is where our own awareness of our bias becomes a meaningful part of our self discovery. This is really powerful stuff. So, through bias, we are not evaluating people or situations equitably. We are applying preconceived notions and assumptions, stereotypes, and labels. Like the operating system in a computer, bias is silently running in the background, unseen, but definitely impacting performance and outcome. Stereotypes and labels are the brain's way of simplifying and organizing our world based on our environment and personal experiences. These are broad generalizations where we automatically assume a person shares the characteristics and the abilities of the group they're in. This could be age, profession, gender, religion, race, weight, and so on. Stereotypes can be positive or negative. All college students are great with technology and they drink too much. Older people are so out of touch. Women are better than men with children, but they're very bad drivers. Fat people are jolly but lazy. Gay people are promiscuous and have a keen eye for pillow selection. And minorities get promoted because of affirmative action policies. Is this true? Of course not. It's ridiculous. These are gross generalizations. And interestingly enough, even when we think a stereotype is positive, it's still an assumption. And it locks people into an invisible expectation. Your unconscious bias filters information too, like a gatekeeper. It decides what data gets through. It also decides what information is important and what can be discarded or dismissed. Because bias becomes a filter for what we look for, notice, and prioritize, it shapes and reinforces those perceptions. Humans are really funny. We search for evidence to support what we already believe is true. We unconsciously look for confirmation of our bias. Bias also influences how we approach a situation, how open or closed we are, how committed or detached, how optimistic or skeptical we are in real time. So, quietly behind the scenes, bias decides for us and dictates what and who we include and exclude. All of this means that in some ways we experience a reality unique to us. Our filters and perceptions are like those distorted mirrors you see in an amusement park or carnival. They stretch and shrink what you can see. They exaggerate some features and minimize others. And through all of this, our bias is guiding evaluation. It helps us to choose how to treat others, how to actually act towards them. Think about how it's felt when you may have been misunderstood, assumed to be someone or something you aren't. For example, if you're very tall, have you been pressured to feel like you should be great at basketball? If you've experienced something like that, you know exactly how this feels. We've said bias is normal, but when bias leads to behavior, call that discrimination or prejudice, we create a playing field for others that is not equitable. A study from the Harvard University Voices of Diversity project found that even though diversity on college campuses is increasing, women and minorities still face prejudice and discrimination. Here in our own university environment, we now have the opportunity to take bias assessments. PFA is giving us all of this opportunity right here, right now. And it's important that we look right at this. Soon, when stepping out of university and entering professional life, we will see even more disparity and inequity. It's a fact. Clearly, there is bias in us and around us. There is no denying it. We can't not do something about this, and we can't wait for someone else to fix it. So, we must start with ourselves and our own personal attitudes. Policies and rules alone won't make this right and won't make our campuses, our community, our world more equitable. In fact, our work here isn't about understanding or responding to organizational bias. This is about each of us taking personal responsibility for our attitudes and our behaviors. It's about making a change. This is a personal investment leading to a collective outcome. Making sure bias unchecked doesn't become prejudice or discrimination, limiting the ability of others to engage. Your individual investment can lead to the ability for all to engage freely and authentically. You can help others find their place at the table. You can help them reach the plate. What an opportunity. Now you have a chance to gain insights into some of your own biases. I'll leave you to take 2 assessments. When you're finished, I'll meet you by way of a podcast to help you unpack what you've learned and to develop a few personal strategies.